more.
Good morning, good morning. How is everybody doing this morning? Woo! Yeah. Awesome. Well, I hope you're enjoying your breakpoint. Really looking forward to this debate. Should we report scams to the SEC? We have Emily Myers from Electric Capital and Mike Dudas from Six Man Ventures. We're going to start with 4 reporting scams with the SEC with Emily.
Great. Thanks so much. Good morning. Ridding crypto of scammers is critical for crypto's growth. Actively reporting scams to the SEC does this. It deters bad actors, allows quality products to flourish, and protects users. We can't onboard the next billion users to crypto without it. 4 reasons why. First, deterring crypto scams is a good use of the SEC's resources. The SEC has the tools and the authority to investigate, impose fines, and prosecute scammers. Active enforcement creates a deterrent effect, signaling to potential scammers that the SEC is vigilant. And directing the SEC's resources to fraud means that A, the SEC is focused on the worst threats for the entire crypto ecosystem, and B, has fewer resources to regulate by enforcement. Second, crypto needs to actively work to overcome a negative reputation that it's rife with scams. We are all excited about the promise of crypto, but others still need convincing. A Digital Currency Group survey of US swing state voters in May of this year showed that only 1 in 3 voters surveyed, 31%, said they have positive views on crypto. But that same survey showed that half of the people would be interested in buying crypto if the government put protections in place. That might be because they see a lot of scams. A recent FBI report showed victims lost over $5.6 billion in crypto fraud last year, and that's up 45% since 2022. In April of this year, Blockade said 50% of recent pre-sale token launches on Solana were malicious. So actively reporting crypto scams can rehabilitate a negative reputation, both because A, will make crypto safer for all users, and B, we can highlight the good actors working to protect users and build quality products. Simply, when we weed out bad actors, we enhance trust in the industry and encourage responsible innovation. 3, actively reporting crypto scams protects investors. Active reporting helps limit the damage. It prevents schemes from growing and helps victims to recover funds. In some cases, the SEC's involvement can lead to asset recovery or compensation for fraud victims, and reporting increases the chances that effective users get some restitution. It also increases public awareness about common scam tactics and contributes to public warnings, and can help coordinate efforts against global crypto fraud networks. Finally, the crypto community is best positioned to report scams. Those of us within the crypto community have the best understanding and awareness of these potential scams, and therefore we're in the best position to alert the SEC. We also have the most to benefit from seeing the SEC take down the scammers. So that's why we should actively report crypto scams to the SEC.
Mike, some hard-hitting arguments. Why should we not report scams to the SEC?
Damn, this is like Trump debating Kamala. Never debate a lawyer. Wowie. And please, any feds in the audience, can you leave right now? So, crypto scams should not be actively reported to the SEC, obviously, for a number of reasons. The first is the majority of cryptocurrencies are not securities, and the SEC is not the correct regulator or enforcement body for the majority of cryptocurrency cases or actions. And they've clearly overstepped their mandate, and therefore, they're not the correct body that you should be speaking with. The SEC does not have standing in issues of commodities, so things like Bitcoin, Ethereum, and nearly every other what they define, they've just made up a term called crypto assets. But they fundamentally don't have standing in most cases of cryptocurrency. If you are a party to a crypto or financial scam, and again, the definition of scam is pretty interesting in crypto, or fraud or financial crime that involves cryptocurrency, it would actually be better to follow up, file a police report, go to law enforcement. These are crimes. Talk to the correct people who can take care of these things, escalate them if necessary to the proper state or federal authorities, and not to a regulator that wildly oversteps its mandate regularly. It would also make sense to speak with a lawyer immediately if you believe that you've been taken advantage of or financial fraud has happened. The SEC has proven, in my esteemed opinion, to be arbitrary and capricious in the enforcement, ignoring many of the largest proven scams and frauds entirely, or large periods of time, while choosing to bring questionable actions against companies, entities, and protocols that attempt to follow a mishmash of regulations that frankly don't exist. Companies and entities like Coinbase, Kraken, Uniswap, OpenSea, who have tried to comply. Sorry, I'm going to go over 3 minutes, but gong me if it's too much. In general, the word scam is wildly misused in crypto. It could be one unhappy person in a NFT community who reports something, and when there's 1,000 happy people.
Mike, let me jump in and see, with the scam, it is a broad definition, and if they're not securities, if they are commodities trade up, they trade down. Why should commodities, with their volatile natures, be reported?
I think what's important to focus on is the scam aspect. So just because something is volatile or just because someone lost money doesn't necessarily make it a scam. A scam is where there was someone who is actively trying to rug pull, misrepresenting, leaving out information, and those are the kind of actors that we all have a united interest in limiting. And it doesn't matter who the regulator is, whether it's the SEC, the CFTC, state regulators, even local law enforcement. The importance is bringing awareness to that bad conduct and doing everything we can to deter it.
Mike, do you agree?
I do agree. It's just, I think the vast majority of people, let's just say in the United States or globally, view cryptocurrency itself as effectively one big scam. Like it's effectively viewed as default scam. So it is a matter, I think, using the definition you use, if there's clear financial fraud, certainly it should be reported, as I said, to the correct authority. But the big issue I see is just a massive misuse of both taxpayer dollars, project time and attention, and frankly, things that I don't view as scams or frauds are resulting and ending up in settlement. So I think the sort of term scam has been bastardized by the SEC specifically in a way that chills innovation in America.
Absolutely, Mike. To your point, what's important is enabling legitimate projects to flourish and creating the regulatory clarity that we need to do that, so that the regulators' resources are focused on going after the bad actors, not just the good actors who are trying to innovate within an ossified regulatory framework.
Absolutely, and the most frustrating part is that the SEC has been, as I said, arbitrary and capricious, and frankly, many years behind the ball. I mean, they just sued OpenSea this year, numerous years after the volume's down 98%. It's unclear who is being protected by these types of actions. Meanwhile, the SEC had ample opportunity to investigate entities like FTX, spent considerable time with them, welcomed them into their office on numerous occasions, and didn't take any action until years after the fraud had been perpetrated.
And that's another reason why we need this clarity, because FTX set up offshore specifically because there wasn't a regulatory framework to enable them to operate onshore. Gary Gensler testified before Congress and said he tends to bring enforcement actions against US-based companies because they're the ones that respond to his subpoenas. If all of the misconduct is going to be pushed offshore because we don't have any regulatory clarity, and all of the innovation is also going to be pushed offshore because the good actors are afraid of enforcement, we've gone horribly wrong. We've lost the plot, and we need to bring it back with some regulatory clarity.
Absolutely. So something you said earlier, who should these things be reported to? And I mentioned a couple folks, but one is actually your local. If you're an American, anywhere you are, but if you're an American, go to your federal representative. Like my local congressman wants to hear stories about why he should care to regulate crypto, why they should actually pass federal legislation about things like custody, things like market structure bill, things like stablecoins. They haven't done that, and part of the reason they're not is because I think people are reporting things, like I said, to the wrong folks like the SEC, versus real human stories of being wronged to the lawmakers who need to act urgently to give a framework for the flourishing of cryptocurrency protocols, projects, and businesses in America.
Absolutely. Crypto is not a partisan issue. It's about innovation, international competitiveness, national security, and privacy. None of those issues are partisan. Everyone in America is equally behind all of those things. And if we can frame the promise of crypto with that and not spend so much airtime on the scams, we could really make some headway with the US regulatory framework.
Exactly, and what frustratingly has happened, it is crystal clear, if anybody read, for example, the Fly Fish Club settlement ruling this week, the SEC has become a political organization. It's a proxy political organization where the Republican commissioners, anytime the SEC has a settlement, there's 3 Democrats and 2 Republicans, they're basically coming out and saying, this is ridiculous, we're winging it, we're making it up as we go. So they clearly are a politicized organization, but the actual politicians and legislators who actually want to work across the aisle to create good regulatory frameworks in America for crypto entities, unfortunately aren't moving fast enough, and the SEC is acting politically in their place.
So I think overarching this conversation has been the SEC hasn't really defined the rules that people can agree upon. As Mike kind of pointed out, broadly, the world thinks potentially crypto is a scam. The SEC thinks crypto is potentially a scam. How do you invest in a world of just scams? How can we actively avoid those so that the SEC will give us a clear framework and say, hey, the crypto industry is doing a good job by itself?
Yeah, so I would say if you talk to, I run a crypto fund. I'm a registered investment advisor overseen by the SEC. And I can talk to 6 different lawyers and spend a boatload of money and get 6 different opinions on the risk assessment of any individual deal that we're looking at and investing in, any sort of entity structuring that we're doing, our custody practices. It's a really, really difficult time to be investing as a US-based call it registered investment advisor, which is the largest pool of capital formation in crypto still. And so we need that to change. And Emily, yeah.
And Emily, with that context, talk with many different lawyers. They'll all give you slightly different opinions of those risk levels. Why should scams continue to be reported to the SEC with such a variety of different opinions?
I think what we need to focus on is enhancing overall legitimacy for the space. The more that we can distinguish the scam from the quality innovation, the better off we will all be. And the more founders can continue to build wherever they want to build, whether that's in the US, here in Singapore, or anywhere else in the world. I talk to founders all of the time who are afraid of the wrath of the SEC. They don't understand how to make sure that they're acting in good faith and that they'll be protected. And we really need some clarity to do that. And the less scamming and bad faith activity that we have, the more room there will be for innovation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've seen our share of investment in U.S. entities drop over the past 2.5 years of our second fund because there's just so much uncertainty, and many of the best entrepreneurs have self-selected out of the U.S. So more clarity is needed. the weird thing, though, is like for the amount of time and grief that the SEC puts upon both investors, projects, protocols, the ultimate results are just so bizarre. Like Block One, right, did a $4 billion plus public offering and then settled for something like $22 million. Like they're slaps on the wrist. So just it's maddening how much uncertainty we're dealing with relative to the ultimate outcomes that just seem more oriented towards being like headlines and harassment versus actually effective protection of investors, which is what their mandate is.
Block One's a great example of where the SEC, even though they went after that misconduct, the victims are still holding the bag 5 years later. The SEC settled that in September of 2019. And in August of this year, the class action lawsuit filed its second attempt to get a court to register their settlement for something like $22 million. And they're still waiting for a court to decide on that exactly 5 years later. So we need to do better in terms of protecting users in our space and making sure that we're rooting out scams to enable the quality projects to really grow.
Exactly. Scams, like you said, and I love that you continue to harp on that, not protecting folks from assets like Solana, which Robinhood delisted, last year or maybe a year or 2 years ago, and basically liquidated their customers' funds at the SEC's insistence for something like $15 to $17, and they missed out on like a 10x. So it's just unbelievable. There's not protection, and therefore, if folks aren't being protected when you report things to the SEC and they're focusing in the wrong areas, I don't believe it's by any means the best venue and the best way to protect investors and to enable capital formation, great entrepreneurs, less risk for folks, and the growth of what I think is one of the most important industries on earth in America.
Emily, you've mentioned the scam word, as Mike mentioned multiple times. If you could wave a magic wand for the SEC and say, hey, let's define scams, what would you love to see?
I would like to see some definition of, we actually don't have to wave a magic wand. We have pretty clear descriptions that exist in the securities law that are asset neutral, that just describe if there are material misrepresentations about how a product works, if you make material omissions about how your product or service works, that's fraud. So that has nothing to do with innovation, that just has to do with telling lies. And we all have the same interest in making sure that the people who are actively out there trying to exploit crypto and crypto users for their own personal gains at the expense of others, those people have no place in the ecosystem. And what we need to do is move those folks out and distinguish those, weed them out so that the really excellent innovators and builders can do their work.
So you're telling me that just because the price of my NFT or coin declined, it's not a scam?
Nope.
I thought that's how it works.
No, just because you lost money doesn't mean you were defrauded.
Okay, good. I hope the people here listening realize that.
So as we're rounding out the debate, since Emily started the conversation, Mike, I would love to give you the floor to kind of wrap up the arguments about why we should not report scams to the SEC.
Yeah, so just to summarize, I don't believe that the SEC is acting in good faith towards the crypto industry today. The chairman, Gary Gensler, has a heavily politicized agenda, is looking to make headlines very similar to like DAs when they're trying to get elected to a higher office. And therefore, if you report something to the SEC, the entity that you're reporting is likely not going to get a fair shake. Evidence has shown over the last few years that that's been the case. And I would highly recommend that you start with law enforcement, start with your local politicians and legislators, and speak to a lawyer about better avenues to report either the fraud or the misrepresentation that has happened to you.
And Emily, with scams being undefined, I would say, in the crypto industry, why should we report them?
We need to report them just to stop them. But that's not the only way that we can stop them. We have a lot of community tools. There are lots of folks in Solana and across the crypto ecosystem building blockchain security tools. And there are lots of community awareness efforts to make sure that people understand how scammers are trying to steal funds. And with that broader awareness that we can deliver from our own community, that can help root out scams too.
Amazing. We'll give it up for these two esteemed
Thank you.
panelists. Thank you for showing
Thank
up
you.
early in the morning.